Sonic the Hedgehog, a name known by many. Most people only know him as a laughingstock in today's day and age, but when I was growing up, he still hadn't quite started along that path yet. I remember a time when Sonic no longer had his own console to call home. There were remasters and collections available on GameCube, but no Sonic game that was made for everyone. That is until this would be the first Sonic game being released across all consoles at the time. Of course, those consoles were the GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and even later the PC. Now, this was a big event for Sonic fans at the time. The year was 2003, and at this point, Sega wanted to hype up the new Sonic title coming out that year. So what do? They named 2003 the year of Sonic, and they put him everywhere. Sonic would be on TV again with Sonic X that year. He would have toys and Happy Meals again, and even got 3 games in 1 year. Those games being the Sonic Adventure DX port for the GameCube, Sonic Pinball, and Sonic Battle, both being for the Game Boy Advance. Now, the quality of those games could be debated, but nonetheless, it was a lot of content for Sonic fans at the time. Sonic and friends would even get themselves a spot with previous rival Mario in the form of a demo disc in Mario Kart Double Dash. It was quite the game to be packed in with at the time. So overall, it was a huge celebration for Sonic and all the Sonic fans at the time. So of course, with this huge celebration came very high hopes for this game. Unfortunately, the game wouldn't end up meeting its 2003 release date in the US. It would see release shortly after in February in the year of 2004, but it did miss the holiday rush altogether that year. Even with that, Sonic Heroes would end up selling pretty well with 3.41 million copies sold by 2007. A solid release to say the least. But would this be a good first step for the Hedgehog onto all consoles? Would he be able to keep up without his own console to call home? These are all questions I had myself when going back to play the game recently. This being the first time that a Sonic game was released across all consoles at the time, this would end up being a lot of people's first Sonic game. So with that, Sega decided that they should appeal to a broader market of gamers at the time. And you may ask why they didn't just make another adventure-styled game to bring in money from people who are already fans of the series. Well, that's simple. It's because Sega thought that only the core audience of Sonic would end up buying the game if they did that. Sega wanted this to be the game that got everyone to Sonic. Whether they were casual or hardcore fan, it didn't matter. This was a game for everyone. This can be backed up by the fact that later in 2004, Sonic Mega Collection Plus would hit the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC. This was just a collection of old Sonic games that weren't previously on the console before, so now everyone had access to them. So of course, if this game did as well as Sega wanted it to, everyone would go out and buy these old games because they would want to play more of the series. Though, Sega still wouldn't forget about its core audience, as the core audience would still influence the core gameplay of Sonic Heroes. Around the time that Sonic Adventure 2 was being shown off, at first there was nothing of Tails in the game really, and fans complained, and Sega listened, so they added him to the game as a late addition, which is kinda why his stages probably aren't the best. Though that doesn't really matter, as fans would keep on talking about the characters they wanted to see, whether it was their favorite or just a character from an obscure game. So with that, Sega decided that this game would have the largest cast of characters yet. As they say, go big or go home, and since Sonic no longer had a console to call home, he went big. This is also probably where Sega's habit of trying to satisfy the fans way too hard after each game started. So with this amount of characters in mind, Sega decided that the game should be based around team gameplay. Along with this choice, it was decided there would be 4 teams with 3 members each. Let's go over those teams now. So there's Team Sonic, Team Dark, Team Rose, and Team Chaotix. Now most of these team pairings would be pretty obvious for most Sonic players at the time, aside from maybe Chaotix. You might not know Chaotix because they're from a more obscure game called Knuckles Chaotix, which is a game that was on the 32X, which most people probably didn't have. From that game you have Vector the Crocodile, SBO the Chameleon, and the one and only Charmy the Bee. Now if you're one of the rare people who did have a 32X and also played Knuckles Chaotix, you may notice that some characters are missing. But if Sega can't be bothered to remember them, I can't either. Now the rest of the pairings would be pretty obvious, but let's go over them anyways. On Team Sonic we have Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, the classic trio. On Team Dark we have Rouge, Shadow, and Omega. Now one of those names you may not recognize. That's because Shadow died in Sonic Adventure 2. He really shouldn't be here, but there he is. Okay, but all jokes aside, Omega is an original character for this game, being a machine built by Eggman. We can get into all the details of that later. And our final team, Team Rose, we have Amy, Cream, and Big, our lovable trio. And with all of our heroes introduced, how about we get into the plot that they exist in? In this game, in contrast to the adventure titles, the story takes more of a backseat this time around. While each team does have their own story, they're all pretty basic and kind of similar. All the stories boil down to in this game is we need to get Eggman, because they all need to be in place for the final battle. The only difference among their stories is why they're chasing Eggman. They each have their own reasons, but most of them feel pretty shallow beyond Team Dark. I'll still explain why each team goes after Eggman, just to clarify, but I'm not going to go super deep into it, as the game doesn't either. For Team Rose, what they're doing is looking for Chocola the Chow, Froggy the Frog of course, and then Sonic. How the Sonic one really comes into that, I don't know, but that's okay. It's just more so to have Amy there for a reason. Because, she can't just help her friends. She's not a nice person. She's a straight bitch. To be fair, even through this story, she looks like a bitch because, her friends' companions are actually in danger. Moving on to Team Sonic. I actually quite like Team Sonic's setup as it's just a classic Sonic game setup. Eggman says he's going to take over the world in 3 days with his brand new ultimate weapon. Can Sonic and Team stop him? Well, let's find out. And you're just set on your way. There's not much to it. Team Dark is a bit different. For Team Dark, we have Shadow returning from Sonic Adventure 2 where he was supposed to die. But Rouge finds him in one of Eggman's bases while looking for treasure. She finds him along with Omega. Shadow can't remember anything, and Omega is pissed at Eggman for leaving him in that room with Shadow. So this sets up them to go along with Eggman, and unlike Amy, Rouge actually just wants to help her friend. So they go along their way, but Team Dark story mostly works as a setup for the next game, Shadow the Hedgehog, which we can get into a whole nother time, but just know that that is the case. And then finally we have Team Chaotix. Team Chaotix is a detective agency down on their luck, so they're willing to take whatever job they can get, and when they get one from a mysterious client, they of course take it without hesitation. So they go through doing things for this mysterious client, which is revealed to be Eggman, so it of course leads them to Eggman, who is trapped on one of his own ships. It's not a huge plot twist because some of the hints that are dropped throughout the campaign are about as subtle as a brick wall. And then the final twist is that all of the bosses you've been fighting are not actually Eggman, but Metal Sonic collecting data. Why would he be collecting data? Well, to become a giant mechanic kaiju, of course, and take over the world. I love the fact that they brought Metal Sonic back, but he only gets to be in the final boss fight, and you only get to see him in his normal form for a couple of seconds, and he doesn't even really get to be a rival to Sonic in this game. And with that, they go super and defeat Metal Sonic with the power of friendship. Woohoo, I love the trope. It's cheesy delivery into everything. I mean, just listen to this. It's fantastic.
It's no use. But why can't I defeat you?
Because we're Sonic Heroes.
You cannot tell me they didn't know what they were doing when they read it like that. All around, it's just really a basic plot, but to be fair, that's all a game needs. It doesn't have to be super in-depth, it doesn't even really have to make sense, as long as it keeps the player moving forward and bringing them to different locations. But that's where I draw issue with this plot. All of the locations that the heroes are brought through have no connection to the plot, so the plot is very much unnecessary. Also, all the heroes go through the same stages, except some of them are longer than the others, as you go through more difficult playthroughs. But that's starting to get into gameplay, so why don't we go ahead and start talking about that in full, and I'll bring up all of those points in more depth there. Great for the stages. All of the bright colors and sprawling locales that were put into, along with the music to go along with them, are just fantastic. They knocked it out of the park with the audio in this game. There's also just so much in each stage to explore if you feel inclined to do so. The stages are based on the design of the classic Sonic games, with so many different directions you could go and different paths you could take, especially using the different team members you have. It's incredible, honestly. I do love that part of the game. It really helps to add replay value if you enjoy the game. Except for 2 stages. Those are Bingo Highway, which is an irredeemable hellhole of a stage that you can never convince me to play again. And then there's Rail Canyon, which is just a bottomless abyss for most of the stage while you're on grinding rails in the sky. I wouldn't be surprised if most people quit this game because of one of these 2 stages. They're easily the worst, and honestly, I could go without them. And to add on top of this, you have to play each of these stages 4 times. Bare minimum to get the final ending of the game. Which is a compromise to having so many characters in the game, is that the stages had to repeat. Whether it's due to development time or disk space, it doesn't really matter, as the end product ends up being the same. The only difference among the 4 playthroughs of the stages is really the difficulty and length of the stages. As you go through campaigns, you'll get more difficult versions of the stages and longer versions, which also adds to the difficulty because it's a test of your patience. The only real playthrough being different is Chaotix, which is the true test of your patience. As you can imagine, all of this gets very repetitive very quickly. Especially since there's 14 stages in the game, except for Team Rose and Sonic, who have 15, including a tutorial stage for both of them. And that's without including any of the bosses or rival battles you have to do in the game, which are also all repeated across most of the campaigns. Now, all of this isn't to say the stages aren't fun, but there's only so much fun I can have playing the stage for the 4th time. And some of these stages you can end up being in for over 10 minutes if you don't know what you're doing or if it's your first playthrough. This is really odd for a Sonic game beyond maybe the treasure hunting levels, and even then most of those aren't that bad. But even then, in this game, that time is only if you don't die. It could be even longer, including deaths, which is a whole nother issue entirely with the jank that's in this game. There has always been jank in Sonic games, and probably always will be. Some of it is charming, some of it's not, but when that jank starts to actually inhibit the gameplay is when I start to draw the line. Before I get into that, I need to get into the 3 different types of characters you have for each team. You have speed type, flying type, and a power type. This in itself isn't bad, it's actually pretty fine, and I like the idea. It's a great way to condense different gameplay styles into singular stages, so you have each of those gameplay styles in each stage. This could be a really great idea. They set up a variety of situations where you can use these different types, and they all have their advantages and disadvantages, and you can kind of play what you want to play suited to your own playstyle, which makes it somewhat unique. But of course, when I talk about jank beforehand, you know it has to have their problems. Now, you might ask where this relates to dying in a stage. Well, I'm getting to that. When you play as a speed character, you're meant to go fast, right? Well, they're definitely fast. They go from 0 to 100 in under a second, and always feel like you're running on soap. And then to top it all off, it feels like you cannot stop if you want to. And to pair that with stage design that has bottomless pits and enemies everywhere, yeah, you're going to be taking hits and falling off constantly. Now, this can somewhat be negated by playing the other characters, which have slower speeds, so it makes it easier to control yourself, but you wouldn't think to use them while running down pathways and through certain set pieces that you wouldn't otherwise know you lose control in and kill you just because you're playing a speed character rather than a fucking power character. Speaking of the power characters, they can also send you flying into bottomless pits at any given moment. Okay, maybe not any given moment, but anytime you're fighting with them. Some of the characters, not all of them, because they have unique animations on each team, but they send you flying forward, and you can't stop yourself, so you end up going flying off the edge and just die. And there's nothing you could even do, because you can't switch characters in the air to, say, a flying character and get back up. No, we couldn't reward you for fast reflexes in a Sonic game. Speaking of the attack animations, they're very cool because each team has their own unique ones, and it really shows off their own characters and how they're different and their own personalities. They could have just used the same animations for every team, but they didn't, and I appreciate it. It's a small detail, but it's something. So since we've talked about the other two types of characters, let's go ahead and just talk about flying as well. And the flying type doesn't have much issue beyond being slow, which is not necessarily a bad thing in this game, as I said, because of the control issues. Though they do have a cap on how high they can fly, which can be a little weird to get used to at first, but is definitely not that big of a problem. Now, with these teams in each stage comes a lot of character interaction. In previous Sonic games, our characters were just silent in stages, and that was just that. But with all the characters being together, they decided to finally give them in-game dialogue. They react to different things in the stages, set pieces, enemies, whatever. But some of these are fantastic, I love them. And then others are absolutely terrible and very generic and are repeated across each playthrough by different characters, which makes it even worse. Though I think it's a small sacrifice to make for some of these character interactions we do get. Now, back to complaining, which is what I do best. My issues with the combat are immense. The combat's pretty basic, but a lot of it can be unfair when you get hit, as your invincibility frames aren't very long, the rings bounce in a very weird pattern compared to what they used to, and sometimes you just get comboed because you get hit and you literally can't move out of the way fast enough or can't get a ring fast enough while you're still in the enemy hitbox, and you just die. But this adds to another frustration in the game: special stages. To get to these special stages, you have to grab a key in each stage in these cages, which that doesn't sound that bad. You get the key and bring it to the end of the stage. Whatever. But no, instead, to bring it to the end of the stage, you have to not get hit. You can see where the issue of hit detection and things like that come into play. Which you could say, well, just don't do the special stages then. No frustration, no problem. Yeah, well, the special stages have Chaos Emeralds, unfortunately. And this is a Sonic game, so you need all Chaos Emeralds to get the final story. And it only gets worse going into the special stages. You're dropped into a half-pipe to try and race towards the Emerald. But since we're playing speed gameplay here, again, you have very little control, and you need to dodge spikes, hit these orbs to keep getting speed and going faster, or, you know, just lose all your speed by catching on invisible geometry that doesn't exist. It can feel very unfair at times, which is a huge problem with a lot of this game. There are so many parts in the game that don't feel like your fault. It just feels like the game did it to you, and you had no control over it. I can't tell you the amount of times I died recording this game. It was an immense amount, and I'm an avid Sonic player, so I shouldn't really be dying that much. There's just that much wrong with this game sometimes. It's a real shame too, because when the game works well and everything comes together, it feels amazing, incredible. But most of the time it just doesn't line up because of small little things. But that mostly happens later on as the stages start to get longer and longer and longer. And repeating those stages only reveals the cracks more and more each time, as you play the same sections and you realize there's something wrong and that you died in the same place every time for no reason and due to no fault of your own. And there's 14 stages in each story, so there's a lot of cracks that you could experience in the game, and if you don't, you got extremely lucky in my opinion. And the boss fights, I don't even really have to talk about. They're pathetic for the most part, and you play the same boss fights across each campaign. Every boss fight basically amounts to spam homing attack until it dies, because why would you wait? And some of them, you're not even allowed to wait, because if you did, you didn't get an A rank, so the game clearly expects you to spam homing attack, so why wouldn't you? And then the team battles are even worse. The game expects you to beat them so fast, but they're so beyond broken. It expects you to use certain team formations when the other team uses certain formation, but none of that ever works, and trying to throw an enemy off the edge is ridiculous. And if you end up with a speed character as the final character on their team for some reason, well, you might as well kill yourself or restart, because there's no way you're gonna get them off, because they have so much speed that they just run straight back to the middle with pinpoint precision. Your best bet is just to spam the whirlwind attack with speed characters and hope for the best. Eventually you'll just win. I'm not even sure why these were included. They aren't fun, and the interactions you get from the cutscenes are all pretty bad, honestly. Now, I'd like to talk about another positive here, which is the Team Chaotix gameplay, in my opinion. While the stages aren't different, the gameplay is at least slightly different, being more of a scavenger hunt than anything. You have to look for collectibles or destroy robots in each stage, which I find pretty fun, though I think it could have been done much better. There's no way to know if you miss something as you're going through a stage or not, so sometimes you could find yourself reaching the end of the stage and having to restart because you missed one robot or one collectible or something like that, and you have to keep going back through over and over again, which the game's already repetitive, and this just adds on to it. Though I can appreciate that they tried to do something different with this team, which I really wish they would have done with every team. It helps to break up the pacing a bit of trying to blast through stages, even when the stages end up being long. The stages end up being long in Chaotix as well, because you're trying to pay attention as you go through the stage and make sure you didn't miss anything. Though, overall, I think it was a fine first attempt, and hopefully they do better later. Spoiler alert, they don't. That's an issue for another time, though. Now, there is more to the game if you want to 100% it, but there aren't very many rewards for it. I really just don't think it's worth it to try and do, honestly. I'll talk about the rewards anyways and what you get for doing them, but just know that I think it's not worth it. So of course, per the norm, you have to get A rank in all stages and bosses, but that's not the end of it, because once you complete this feat, which is not a feat of skill, but a feat of patience, you unlock Super Hard Mode, which at first it may not sound so bad. More enemies, maybe more health, whatever. Yeah, that's not it at all. What it is another playthrough of Team Sonic's story, but with harder versions of the stages and no ranks. Well, that's cool. You don't have to worry about getting A ranks in Super Hard Mode, so that's pretty cool, right? Well, instead what you have to worry about is if you ever run out of lives, you have to restart the whole playthrough over again. And you would think after doing all of this stuff, you would get some great reward, right? Well, you get some 2-player modes, some 2-player skins, and a PNG, I guess? These rewards are absolutely pathetic to what we got before. Every other game up until this point, 100% completion, was way more satisfying. And I'm even including Sonic 1 in that. And in that game, all you get is a different ending. Though, that's about all I have to say for the gameplay, honestly. There's not much more I can say. I hope after everything that I've talked about, you can see why this game didn't live up to the expectations that people set for it for me. I didn't grow up playing this game like I did Sonic Adventure 2, so I don't have the nostalgia goggles for it like I do for that game. and that's also another game that was dragged down by its design. But I do always remember seeing Sonic Heroes at my friend's house when they were playing it, and I always saw the best parts of it, so I thought it had to be just the most amazing Sonic game that I could play. And maybe that was part of my reason of having such high expectations, was just those memories and what people had said beforehand. I didn't really know what to expect going into this game, but all of those things put together kind of made this game a disappointment to me because I thought it was going to be so much better than it was. I had fun when the game was working correctly and everything came together. It was great, but overall, I just can't recommend the experience as there's too much. I mean, I would recommend playing Team Sonic's playthrough, and that's probably about it. And the reason that is just the highs don't outdo the lows for me in this game. But also, maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe I'm bad at games. Maybe I'm stupid. And if I am, let me know, because I'd like to be able to enjoy this game. Honestly, it would only benefit me. But with all of that said, that's the end of the video. I don't have anything else to say about this game. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoy Sonic Heroes, honestly. And if you do, that's great. And with all of that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like and remember to subscribe. And leave a comment on what you'd like to see me cover next. And I'll catch you in the next one.